Welcome back. Happy OT month.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Today's OT month.
April 1st.
Yeah.
It's also April Fool's Day.
Yes.
You know what I saw the other day? So random. But I saw like these little cake pops that were made from Brussels sprouts. I literally want to do that one of these years. Like, I love things like that.
Oh, that sounds like you.
I know. One year I was going to put like toothpaste in Oreos because Ralph likes them. And he's like, you probably would just totally eat it. But I'm like, I totally didn't. Anyways, yeah. So how have you been?
Good. Yeah, we're on spring break. It's just nice to have kind of just relax, you know?
Oh my gosh. I know. It's seriously, you go like 200 miles an hour and then you just stop and you're like, wait, let me just figure out life again.
Yes.
Like, what the heck?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm nesting like crazy. So my poor husband has like a million things on to-do list. I'm like, okay, I need this, this, and this ready for the baby because
You're getting close.
oh my gosh. Yeah. And we know that like these next couple months are just going to fly by, especially with work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can try to get as much done now, that I'll be a lot happier.
Yeah.
Happy wife, happy life.
So true.
All right. So today we are talking about behavior and really kind of diving into what motivates behavior. Behavior happens for a reason and, and may not always be sensory driven.
Yeah.
So that's something that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And then also we're going to take a look at the social emotional development of a child and how that kind of plays a role and all of that. So it's really important. I think when I first started, again, OTs, we have a lot of education and experience with sensory behaviors, what is driving some behaviors. And it's kind of tricky to kind of figure out, okay, do I need to put in like a sensory diet or do I need to give a sensory tool to help them feel a little bit more regulated? But we have to also be very mindful that behaviors can be driven by other factors.
Yes.
And then again, you also have to be very much aware of just the development and where the kids are at and how they're functioning because that can influence the motivating factor. So we'll talk about that.
There's so much to consider and to look at when it does come to that.
Oh, totally.
I remember, I think it was my second year in the school setting and there was a course, is it sensory or behavior? And I was like, I need this course. I need to take this course. And it went in like, okay, I'm going to have the answer. And you come out of it just realizing there is so much that contributes to behavior. It's challenging to find out what could be the motivating factor to behavior.
And some of the underlying reasons. And it's so, it's really tricky. And it's not a one size fits all like intervention. It's not, So I think our goal was just we wanted to kind of emphasize a little bit more on the motivating factors because behavior happens for a reason, regardless if you're a child or adult, what's happening and why.
Yeah.
And I thought this was interesting too. When I was working at the psychiatric healthcare facility, there was some kiddos that initially appeared like they were defiant. They didn't want to participate in some of the groups. And again, I love this part of like just observing and figuring out what is happening with the behavior. Because I'm like, naturally, we all want to be a part of something. Those are things that you just, you want to engage with others. You want to be, how do I explain it? You just want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And so one time I was seeing this kiddo and I'm like, okay, what is he trying to escape from? Right? So he was obviously trying to escape a task. He would leave as soon as he would notice a paper pencil task. And I'm like, okay, so how is that? He obviously is wanting to escape. Now, what do you do after that?
Yeah.
And come to find out, again, he was trying to escape because his fine motor skills were probably at a 3 to 4 year old level, even though he was an adolescent.
Yeah.
So again, was lacking confidence. The task was challenging. He wanted to leave. He appeared like he was defiant. He knew that if he had an extreme episode, boom, he wouldn't have to participate.
Yes.
So once, again, this was something where I knew I want to see how we can get this kiddo to be just even participate even just come to the group. He doesn't necessarily have to do anything, but I just want him to sit
Yeah,
in
like
my group.
that's
it.
the first step. Yeah.
And so the biggest thing was I'm like, okay, the furniture was a little bit heavier. And so I'm like, hey, I need your help. Can you do me a favor? Something that was just to build his confidence and then to feel needed and wanted. And so
That's
asked
so
him.
important.
Yeah,
So
it's
important.
so important. And as soon as I had asked him that one time, that I'm like, okay, cool. So I already had, I started to build that trust with him. The next group, he was like, hey, Jenna, do you need any help with any of the furniture? Yeah, I do. And I tried to make it to where I actually did, and it wasn't just superficial. It looked fake, you know. And then I would constantly say thank you. And before you know it, boom, he sat down. I'm like, hey, I'm going to need your help with this. Can you do me a favor? Just pass out the paper or pass out whatever. Yeah. And so then slowly but surely modifying that activity so that way it can meet his needs and where he was at. And then we'll talk about social emotional development and the importance of understanding that as well when it comes to behavior. But that's why it's so important to really understand why things are happening, because it can look like a child is defiant or it can look like something else is happening. But there's other underlying reasons that I feel that as an occupational therapist, we can really help with all that.
Yeah, because, we're really good at just observing. That is number one. I mean, just observing the child, not as the behavior is happening. Like, you have to try to get there before. And if you can't observe before, then ask a lot of questions. A lot of questions of what happened before you saw the behavior and then after the behavior. So it's a lot of that time goes into trying to figure out what is going on. And it could be tricky, but if you spend the time, you can usually figure out what is causing that behavior. And I think for me, another really helpful resource that you shared with me that I had never seen before was the behavior motivation scale.
Oh, yep.
And when you were first kind of mentoring me, and I would say, okay, this is what I saw with this student, like, what's going on? Can you help me figure this out? And you're like, use the behavior motivation scale, choose that one behavior, and you answer all of these questions, and it's going to help you understand the motivating factor. And so there's going to be 4 factors.
So there's different motivators to the behavior. So it either can be driven by a tangible item. So if a child wants something like a toy or, food rewards and whatnot, whatever, if it's just a tangible item. It also can be driven by attention. So whether they're getting any sort of attention from an adult or their peers, and it can even be negative
Positive
attention
or negative.
Even if it's negative, they're still getting attention. They're still getting some sort of reinforcement to that behavior. It can also be escape. So again, they're trying to escape the task. They're trying to escape where they're at, what they're doing, the demand. So it can be, again, that can be another motivating factor. And then it also can be driven by sensory. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one and then not the rest. It can be a combination of 2. You could see a child may want to be escaping a task because it's too loud in that environment. So again, you have to really try to fine tune. The reason why I like the behavior motivation scale, I had went to a course and they had talked about that scale, and I liked it because it really helps you fine tune what you're observing.
Oh, for sure.
And eventually you get to a point where you don't necessarily need it to always, you don't need to always fill it out to understand what's happening.
But you start asking yourself those questions.
You start asking yourself those questions. You start noticing what you're looking for when you are observing a behavior. And that's what I really liked about it and I appreciated about that scale. So I highly recommend new grads, or if you don't feel as strong with behavior, try that out and then see where that takes you. Talk to your school psychs. But those are things where I initially, again, you only can observe one behavior at a time. So for example, if a child, the bell rings at recess, the child immediately drops to the ground, doesn't want to go inside. They start kicking and spitting at maybe the the teachers or whatnot. So there's a lot of behaviors that are in that. So you're not just going to put all of that on that behavior scale. You're going to pick one. So the first thing is, boom, drop to the ground. To the floor. Mm-hmm. So what's happening there? Why did the child drop to the floor? Well, they obviously don't want to participate in the school. They want to stay at recess. So you're going to really answer all of those questions in regards to that one behavior. Then you'd fill out another scale and looking at, okay, the spinning. So those are things that you kind of just to think about. But I really like that. I felt like that was probably one of the biggest tools in my toolbox when I first started.
Oh, yeah. I definitely agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's good, too, especially in the school setting, to, oh, my gosh, I can't breathe. I'm gonna take a breath. So it's also good to talk about it with your school psychologist. Yes. If you're in the school setting, because if the behavior is really intense to the point where it's interfering in their school day, there may be a possibility that there's a behavior intervention plan put into the IEP, which again, there has to be a behavior goal. But knowing that there's a sensory component there, it's really helpful to also get that input from an OT. And if we notice that it is sensory driven, then we can also be a part of that.
Oh, yeah.
To provide support.
Oh, yeah. Provide support and talk about any potential accommodations the child may need. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. That's good to collaborate with them.
Absolutely. And, I know we've talked about the different patterns in previous episodes, but it's really important to understand the different patterns and how, again, there's more to sensory than just the the sensory modulation pattern. Mm-hmm. So and that can contribute to behavior as well. So for example, say a child has challenges with the discrimination, or they have sensory motor pattern challenges, they could escape that task because of those underlying challenges. Mm-hmm. So again, behavior is not a one size fits all. It's not always something that you may want to put in a quote unquote sensory diet. Mm-hmm. So you really have to, first off, understand the motivating factors. You have to understand the social emotional component, and you have to understand just overall development. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, tricky.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I don't even know if it makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah. It's really complicated. So it's not as simple as saying, yes, it's sensory, or, there's a lot that goes into it for you to really kind of get to that answer. And like you said, it could be a combination of motivating factors and yeah.
I know. I love sensory and behavior. Well, it's just like fun to observe, and it's like just to kind of like really figure out what's happening, because again, behaviors happen for a reason. They're not just going to be there just to be there.
Yeah. I think there was another course that I went to, and the instructor said that like a child doesn't want to be bad. Like there's a reason for, what you're seeing. Mm-hmm. And so, we're one of the key professionals who work with children who can help, figure out what's driving that behavior. So.
Oh yeah, it's totally. And there was like a quote too that I saw that I was like, gosh, this is so perfect. But it said, when a child doesn't know how to hold their pencil, what do? We teach. Mm-hmm. If a child doesn't know how to put on their shoes, what do? We teach. Mm-hmm. If a child doesn't, know how to do A, B, C, or D, we teach. But why do we have a different answer or response when, like, if a child has challenges with behavior? Do we punish? So it's really, again, it's you have to understand what's motivating it so you can teach the child how and what is expected of them and all that.
Yeah.
Let me breathe. My behavior right now is just pregnant and just tired. Just kidding. Okay, so that kind of like just gives a nice little foundation with that. But I also was telling you earlier, I'm like, it's so important, right, to understand like the social emotional development of children as well. So, for example, with my son, he's 2 years old, and he may, if he wants a toy, and maybe at that time we're not necessarily allowing him to play with it because either we're at dinner time or, it's just not an appropriate time to play with that at that moment. he may have an extreme outburst and have like a full-on tantrum where he drops himself to the ground and he starts to cry, big alligator tears. But I'm not going to just sit back and say, okay, I think he needs deep pressure or a big hug to, well, he might need a big hug afterwards. But
you're just not
But I'm not going to
the...
assume that it's sensory driven.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to just put in like a sensory diet for that behavior, because that is pretty appropriate at that age.
Yeah.
For them to throw a little bit bigger tantrums because they're still developing that part of their brain. And those are things to kind of be more aware of. You know, obviously it's tangible driven. Afterwards, I may, you know, give them a little hug. Oh, okay, you're fine, you know, and then continue with the day. But it's really important to understand the social emotional development of a child.
Yeah. I think when I had my girls, that was really obviously having them and seeing them go through all the stages, you understand it a little bit more. I felt like I could understand it a little bit more and understand their behaviors and what was typical, you know, for them and in general compared to other kiddos. And then you can take that and also apply that to, you know, the schools or whatever setting you might be working with the child. So you kind of know, you know, that typical development and what's not typical.
Yep.
Yeah.
So for social emotional development, again, everything kind of begins when the baby's born. Mm-hmm. As far as the understanding the attachment within parent-child relationship and whatnot. But a 4 to 6 month old may be now looking and gazing at parents and really trying to take in all those facial expressions, the reactions of parents when they do something. And so that's kind of where it starts in a sense. You know, a 7 to 9 month old may be now playing peekaboo. They may start crying if they have, you know, strangers holding them or someone that's not mom or dad. Because again, they're just learning their environment. They're figuring out the world around them.
Yeah.
Who's in their environment. And so those are kind of where those kiddos are at. So again, those children may not need a sensory diet because they're crying and they're dysregulated. Those are just natural things that happen within that stage. A 10 to 12 month old, they're getting attention from family members and they're really liking that. They're maybe, you know, repeating that same behavior because they know that they're getting a reaction out of their family members. And again, that fear with strangers will probably continue along that stage. That's why when they have, when you hand the baby over to someone they may not be as familiar with, they may begin to cry, wanting mom, wanting dad. So yeah, that's that stage. Yeah. Within the 1 to 2 years, you'll see bigger tantrums. They're really wanting to develop their independence. And so again, those are things that they may completely refuse you doing some of the tasks for them because they want to try. And then boom, they may get really upset because they can't do it, but they're really wanting to try.
Oh yeah.
So you see those big alligator tears. 2 to 3 year old, they're showing more affection. They're really wanting to be independent with dressing skills or feeding, you know, they don't really, they want to try to do things more on their own. And again, this is pretty general. So I just kind of want to give everybody an idea of where the child may be at. As far as their social emotional development.
Yeah, that's typical.
And 4 to 5 year olds, they're wanting to develop more friendships. They're playing more cooperative play. They're understanding the feelings of others around them. And so those are things just to kind of think about as well as understanding the driving motivators. And the reason, again, like I say that is because, you know, a child may be, say, 12, 13 years old, you know, chronologically, but they're, you know, similar to when we assess fine motor skills, the child may be functioning at a lot lower level based off of their development with their social emotional skills, which may be influenced to their attachment with their caregiver, their parent. There's a lot of reasons as to why a child may be delayed within the area of the social emotional development. I need to take another breathing break. But yeah, so.
But that's really important to know. So you know the typical development. And like you said, that's a lot of, we've seen that a lot where we have a client who is a little bit older, but at that social emotional level, they're at that low level, like 1-year-old to 2-year-old. And so you see some of those behaviors, kind of helps you understand a little bit more kind of what's going on with them, but be aware of that's, you know, that is something to look at.
Yep. That's something to think about, something to pay attention to, and just to kind of keep in mind, because again, like, you know, my son, he's 2 years old, but some of those behaviors that he's exhibiting, it could be because he's tired. You know, I mean, think about even yourself. You know, if I'm exhausted, man, I just kind of want to have it like quieter around the house. I'm just tired. I'm ready to wind down. I want to go to sleep. You know, so those are things to also keep in mind too when you have little ones. You know, obviously the social emotional development, they're at that 2 to 3-year-old level, and those are typical behaviors you may see. But then also you have to keep in mind that, you know, they may either be hungry, they may be tired. So those are natural things that may be happening throughout the day that can influence behavior, and not necessarily means that, oh, he's showing a little bit more distress today. Maybe he's functioning at a 7 to 9-month-old level. No, they're just tired. So just take a nap or go to sleep or whatnot. So those are things to also think about.
Yeah.
Yes, I love behavior. It's so tricky, but it's so good to really like understand and dive through to see what is happening and why it's happening, and when a sensory intervention may need to be put into place. But again, sensory is, like we've always mentioned before, it's not a one size fits all. You know, in a lot of times you'll see, whether it's online, whether, you know, you'll see there's a lot of focus on just that modulation piece, because that may influence self-regulation and behavior. But there's other patterns that you do want to be mindful about, because that also can influence behavior as well.
Yep.
That's my thought. That's my thought. So yeah, and I was telling you earlier that there was this one, I forgot. Maybe I need to find this this study, but they showed the behaviors of babies when, you know, their parents are either distracted by something else or on their phone. They're not really paying attention to the baby. Babies were like 7, 8, 9 months old, and they're really trying to get parents' attention. And, you know, that caregiver was just distracted with her looking on their phone, and the baby kind of just, you know, was really trying and then just stopped. And then as soon as that distraction was taken away, the mom was engaging. It was just like a night and day difference with that reaction to the baby and how they're learning the different emotions. So it's so important to kind of think about, you know, and even for myself too, you know, you get so caught up on your phone and everything is on your phone, but how that's really influencing the behavior and the development of your child, because again, they're wanting and they're learning those attachments.
Oh yeah. And they're observing your behavior, and so children are going to mimic and imitate their parents and how they respond to like certain situations. And so if they're seeing, you know, my behavior and how I respond to like a stressful situation or anything, they're going to pick up on that as well, and they can be reacting the same way. Like in the car, you know, I was thinking about this the other day, like someone totally cut me off, almost hit us, and I was like, I was scared, but I was just like getting upset, and my little one's like, you know, mommy, what's wrong? And I just like took a deep breath, you know, like these are good things for them to observe you doing. Like, how do I respond? Am I gonna get really upset and yell, and you know, or what is my response in that situation? So they also learn you know, by observing us. So it's really important to
be mindful, because we're co-regulators.
Yeah.
So behavior it's a lot, But if you work in the school setting, this is something where that collaboration with your school psychologist, again, it's a multidisciplinary team. A child may want to escape because of challenges with their speech and language. So this is where it's an entire team approach with behavior. And again, everything needs to be generalized amongst different settings and very consistent as far as how you're providing it, because kiddos are smart and they'll realize how, especially if it's driven by escape, they'll realize, hey, I might be able to get away with this in this setting and I can do a little bit more to get out of it. Mm-hmm. So again, being on that same page with each other in the team, and also that relates at home as well too. Mm-hmm. Kiddos can pick up a lot of things and they know exactly what what they can get away with and what they can't.
Oh, yes. That's so true.
Anyways, yes. So that's that.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all. Goodbye. Just kidding. No, thank you so much for listening. Definitely don't forget to visit our website at OT.Mommas.Life.com. There you can find a lot of information about previous episodes, show notes, and more.
Yes. And check out our YouTube channel.
Yes. YouTube,
subscribe and like.
TikTok. We're everywhere. All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.